Good evening. This is Group Six's presentation on festival theater, playwriting, and dramaturgy. Tonight, our storytellers are going to be Connie Baldwin, Rachel Chen, Nicholas Schindler, Wilson Sofoifa, and Kayleen Trinkner. To begin, we're going to be going over concepts and terms. To begin, thespian. This was a Theban actor used commonly to denote an actor in its modern usage. Satyr play, a short and comical form of drama with a chorus of satyrs, half men, half goat creatures. Machina, a crane-like device used to move actors who played gods as if they were flying. This is also the Greek term for machine. Deus ex machina, literally God from the machine. This is a term denoting a contrived ending that ends a dramatic situation, and this is a term used today. Supernumeraries. These are extras. Choragus, a wealthy man of the community who paid the expense of a production and paid for the training and costumes of the chorus and musicians, very similar to the modern-day producer. The aspects of Greek comedy are the prologue, the paradis, aegon, parabasis, episodes showing the happy idea, and komos. Very similar to the idea of Greek tragedy, the Greek comedy had many different and specific requirements it had to go through. Moving on to the Roman Empire, ludi is the word referring to the Roman games or the Roman religious festivals. At these festivals, they performed gravitas, or the seriousness of purpose. What was the purpose of these plays? The purpose was to entertain. Thus, comedy was a very common and a very popular form of drama and theater. Moving on to the medieval ages, liturgical drama was drama performed in the Middle Ages within churches and monasteries focused around Christian values. It eventually became vernacular religious drama. During the medieval ages, there were trade guilds, these organizations founded by common tradesmen that secured both jobs and grew in influence throughout European townships. These guilds were actually put in charge of putting on religious plays. The most common of these were the Corpus Christi plays. These were religious plays detailing biblical stories. Getting my water. Excuse me. Ranging from Genesis to Revelation. Each play was sponsored and put on by different trade guilds. Mansions were wagons with the actual stage on which actors would be on, and each trade guild was in charge of these mansions. And each mansion was parked at a platea, which was typically on the street. Later on during the medieval ages, morality plays became a significant way of drama, which diverged from typical biblical stories. Nowadays, we hear about playwriting, which is just writing plays, dramaturgy, which is the study of drama, production, which is the financial and monetary creation of theater, and we have a director now who has the specific purpose of making a play happen and being in charge of how that works. And potentially, we can have a dramaturg or a literary manager who is an assistant to the director or even a playwright who studies a play, advises and asks necessary questions to the director and the entirety of the cast. Rachel, you can go ahead and start.
Sorry. Since the very earliest time, some from the theatrical activities have already existed, although surviving reports only trace it back to only 2,500 years ago. During the first 2,000 years of its existence, Western theater was markedly different from the professional and commercial theater that we know today and has flourished only during the past 400 years. This type of theater flourished in ancient Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe. The theater of ancient Greece. Theater in Western world can be traced back to ancient Greece, especially Athens, which is often considered the cradle of Western civilization. The belief in the human capacity to make big decisions is in stark contrast to the belief of early societies. was the god of wine, one of the main products of Greece, and the god of fertility, and his plays are staged in remembrance. By 15th century BC, Athens held 4 festivals a year in honor of 3 of which was theatrical performance. Athens was established in 534 BC of contest for the best tragedy, a form that also originated in Athens. From the name, we derive the word therapin, which is still used to refer to an actor today. Plays are sure have a comedic and satirical tone used to poke fun and certain Greek myths, and are staged in the wake of tragedy. Among tragedies, Oedipus the King is often considered the best play.
Dionysus was the god of wine and fertility. Many of his plays were presented in his honor, and many people worshipped him. Aeschylus, he had 7 of his 80 plays survived from the Greek times. Plays were part of trilogies, which were 3 plays that were on the same theme. He had many heroic figures with significant philosophical issues. Sophocles was one of 10 generals, which was the highest rank in Athens state. 7 of his 120 plays survived. He had masterful dramatic structure, moving stories, complex characters, beautiful poetry, and universal themes. Euripides, 18 of his 90 plays survived. Cyclops was the only surviving satyr play. He challenged many Athenian beliefs and customs, which many people didn't like at the time. Once he was dead, people liked his plays a lot more and understood what he was saying. Influential people in playwriting, one was Yasmina Reza. She was a French actress turned French playwright. She explored intellectual arguments, then peeled back and exposed the ridiculousness of humans. One of her 2 first plays made her receive awards for Best Author. Critics labeled her plays as comedy, and she labeled them as tragedies. Gotthold Ephraim Lessing was influential in dramaturgy. Dramaturgy traces back to him. He was hired at Hamburg National Theater as an in-house critic, and he offered advice on selection of plays, critiqued company's production, and published a journal that influenced public taste.
During the theater festivals, we had some historical events happen. One of those historical events was the Dionysian Festival, which was created during the 5th century in Athens, usually partaking over an extended period of time near the end of March. These festivals from the city of the Dionysus would be offerings to their god Dionysus, the god of wine and fertility, to ensure fertility civic pride. Major showcase of wealth and power was throughout these festivals in order to prove Athens was a superior state and city among the other cities across the nation. The second festival I would like to highlight would be the Corpus Christi Festival, approved in 1311 by the Church, which celebrates the redemptive powers of the sacrament, union of humans, the meaning to human existence, and the promise of redemption through Christ's sacrifice. The Corpus Christi would be celebrated from May 21st to June 24th as an outdoor performance due to its long days and warm weather. Plays, for the most part, were dramatic plays that would highlight important biblical events such as the creation and the Last Judgment. Costumes were an important part of these plays. They were chosen deliberately to differentiate inhabitants of earth, heaven, and hell. Earth inhabitants wore medieval garments according to their rank. Angels wore church robes with wings attached to the back. God would have his face gilded and wore high church dignitary. The devil characters wore masks to emphasize their deformities. Continue on with the Corpus Christi festival. The church would involve every rank and profession to show unity among its inhabitants, from churchmen to merchants to craftsmen, which led guild assumptions of dominant role of staging outdoor religious plays. Central feature was the procession through the town with consecrated bread and wine. No permanent theatrical spaces were always improvised. Stages would either be in a fixed location or movable. As shown in the image next to you, these were the form of movable plays that would go around the city on wagons called mansions. And these mountain plays would be performed in various stops among the city for people to enjoy.
As we've talked about, Greek, Roman, and medieval theater all had their own special addicts. Theater in the Western world can be traced back to ancient Greece, which was in 500 BC. The festival theater flourished in ancient Greek. Greek drama emphasized the attempts of human characters to control their own destinies. But however, happiness still depended on a harmony between human and supernatural forces. The theatrical culture flourished in ancient Greece. In the city of Athens, as storyteller Wilson has told us, a festival called Dionysia, which would honored the god Dionysius, which is god of wine and fertility. That happened several times, and by the 15th century BC, they had 4 festivals each year in honor of this god. Out of the 4, 3 of these festivals were theatrical performances, and they were given as offerings from the city to Dionysius. Plays were performed in theaters of Dionysius on a slope of the hill as seen in your right picture. 3 dramatic genres that emerged from this were tragedy, comedy, and satire. In our tragedy, the most noteworthy Athens tragedy was Oedipus the King by Socrates. This play was originally called Oedipus, but later was changed because he wrote another play right before he died. He named this one Oedipus the King, and that helped to distinguish the difference. Other tragedies that were written were the Bacchae. Then modern-day playwrights Lee Brewer and Bob Tilson wrote a play called The Gospel at Colonus in 1983. This play was written using text from Oedipus Rex, Anagon, and Oedipus at Colonius. And this epic story is adapted to modern Black Pentecostal church services. So in our satire, there is a play which is short, and it's a comic, and it's kind of pokes fun at some of the Greek myths using a chorus of half men, half goat. The play provided comic relief following all these tragedies. The Psychopolis was the only traditional play that survived. The Roman theater experience was around 200 years after the first performance of Oedipus the King. Rome became a major power, eventually ruling over an extensive empire for hundreds of years. Theater was still religious, though in honor of several gods instead of just one god. The Romans placed theatrical performances in the same category as sports or other forms of diversions. The Romans used what they call a gladiator contest, which means that they made a Colosseum in the round, which is on your lower right corner. That's what they made. They made it like a theater in the round where spectators could watch these festivals happening. At the bottom was a pit, above were the seats. In the bottom of the pit where Christians were thrown and lions were on the other side, so you can guess what happened, and that's what they thought was entertaining. There is a modern day gladiator written by David Franzioni, and it was a movie that was written for that 180 AD with a storyline following that gross betrayal and vengeance of Christians. However, instead of lion versus man, it was prisoner versus prisoner until the death.
Lastly, we have theories during each of these periods of time. Festival theater was largely based upon the religious festivals of the time and the location. And so in Greece, theater was set aside for the wealthy to produce and the privileged to participate in. The wealthy and the royals were the actors. They were the ones who spoke. There was also a heavy emphasis on writing tragedy with a specific format, along with comedy. The state and the government was actually put in charge of these theater festivals, and they would appoint each choragus. In Rome, gravitas, need for purpose, was emphasized, and so in honor of a festival setting, Romans performed many comedies. The purpose was to entertain, not to necessarily think. These were also funded by the state. And after Rome's conversion to Christianity, a favorite form became the mime because it was used to ridicule Christian sacraments due to its short poignancy. And these were not the typical French mime. These were just some person on the street performing something. Then we had medieval theater, which is designated to be purely religious with Christian values. And one of the Christian values is lying's bad. Don't do it. And so this went against theater because you're being someone else. And so because they had to be religious and because it lost favor, actors were now laymen. They were your neighbors. They were your bosses. It wasn't someone of high rank of society necessarily. It was whoever you could get from a trade guild. In the medieval ages, there begins to be a sense of more productive freedom since trade guilds are put in charge of productions rather than purely the government being in charge. Major differences were that the Greeks danced and focused on values and dilemmas. The Romans had music more equally distributed through a play with an emphasis on popularity, what everyone else wanted to see. And medieval theater had improvised music with emphasis on Christian teachings. Now, nowadays, we don't have as many festival theaters. Sometimes we'll have a seasonal holiday themed theater production, but that's it. Nowadays, theater is more focused on the financial aspect of things. What'll sell? Who's going to make it? Who's going to be influenced by this? And so nowadays, you can go to a show any week of the year. It isn't designated by the state. It isn't designated by anybody besides those who are willing to pay. And so we see these two huge contrasts. However, the principle still lies. Theater makes us think like the Greeks intended it to. Like the Romans, we want to be entertained. And like in the medieval ages, we can still find and see values that are eternal and meaningful and purposeful. And that is why theater is a timeless art form. Thank you so much for watching.